Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about the new limited Genshin free 5-star. That's right, I'm sure you've all heard by now, but Genshin Impact recently announced in their 5.0 livestream we're going to be getting one of these 7 5-stars for free in the 5.0 batch. And today I want to talk about which one I'm picking and which one I think you should pick. It really depends on what your account looks like and a lot of different variations, so I want to get a little bit more into it. But of course, before we do that, do make sure to subscribe to the channel. Only a small percentage of you are actually subscribed, and it really doesn't take that much time at all. But anyways, let's talk about all the 5-stars in Genshin Impact. Now, the first thing I want to clarify before anything, Genshin Impact is a really easy game, and regardless of which one you choose, honestly can't really make a bad decision because all of these will help your account to a certain extent. Obviously, there's some that are a little better than others, but generally I always just suggest going with which one is your personal favorite, as I do when I'm playing the game. But if you want a more meta choice and you want to decide based on their kits and other factors, well, then this video's for you. First off, let's talk about Diluc. So Diluc is a little interesting. He's a character who is focused as a pyro main DPS. Now, he's fallen off a little bit over time. During 1.0, he was definitely one of the best characters in the game, but nowadays there are a lot of pyro DPSs that just quite simply outclass him. You can use his burst and infuse his normal attacks with pyro, which lead for some big hits, but generally he doesn't do all that crazy of damage. But like I said earlier, you can use any character to beat any content in this game because generally the content is pretty easy. That being said, Diluc is generally worse than other pyro DPSs in the game, such as Yoimiya, Hu Tao, and even Linny. I would say outclass him, and generally some other elements are just better than pyro is right now. But who knows, because Natlan's coming up, maybe Diluc will be even better than he was before. Personally, I have a C5 Diluc against my will. I do not want a C5 Diluc, but I have it. There are a lot of good weapons for Diluc. Ones that I like include Serpent Spine. I've been using the prototype Archaic on him, which is like a free craftable weapon. There are a ton of good options for Diluc. And then for your artifacts, again, there's a variation, but the one I prominently use is Crimson Witch of Flames. The other thing that's nice about Diluc is that he fits into a variation of different teams. You can pair him with really good supports like Xingqiu, Bennett, Kazuha, any good supports you can slap with him, and he's gonna work just fine, and you can basically clear all the content with him. As for pulling his constellations, I generally suggest against it. If you already have one, I don't recommend rolling for constellations. These aren't going to be all that game changing, other than maybe the C6, because it does increase attack speed, which is pretty huge. But with that being said, let's move on to the next character, Qiqi. Now, I have a lot of strong opinions about this character, none of which are all that good. She's one of the only characters that I do not have past level 20, and that says a lot because I legitimately have 5 constellations for her. And at her 6th constellation, she can actually revive a fallen party member, which is actually kind of cool. So I am genuinely debating getting a Qiqi just so I can get the free revive. Generally, Qiqi's playstyle is just inherently worse than a lot of healers is, just because she doesn't provide anything additional other than healing. And when you're a healer, you usually want to provide something secondary, like for example, Bennett has his buffs. Any Animo healer usually has the 4-piece Viridescent, which is a huge buff to them. But poor little Qiqi doesn't really get any of that. Her talents are very simple. It's just a bunch of healing based on her max attack. And to be honest, she's not much better than Barbara is, in my opinion. There are a ton of better alternatives. In fact, she has a better alternative in a 4-star being Diona, who you are able to get C6 way easier because she's a 4-star character, and these give really good effects, such at level 6 you get your increased elemental mastery, which is absolutely huge. In my personal opinion, Qiqi should probably be the last character on your list if you're deciding what 5-star to get. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Jean. Jean is a character who's got better recently thanks to the addition of Farina, who likes to be in party with characters who have universal heals that heal the whole team. So since Farina's got added, Jean has got a huge buff to her kit, which has made her a lot better. She works well with weapons like Skyward Blade, which increases her energy recharge. I've seen some funny builds with Aquila Favonia, and other 5-star weapons are generally good for her. She also works well with Phonia's sword. Sacrificial sword is fine for more energy. She is a very, very good unit and one of the better healers in the game because of the use of the Viridescent Veneraire set, which decreases opponents' elemental resistance, which is a very good set effect. Her healing is also based on her max attack. However, generally, I don't like building her with attack because I find that she doesn't need all of it because she already overcaps all your characters on heals anyways. So I personally tend to build her with crit and animo damage for just more damage in general. Her constellations are actually pretty fun. Her Constellation 2 gives her more attack speed and movement speed, which can be pretty nice for the overworld. She's not a character who I think absolutely needs constellations or one that I necessarily recommend rolling for constellations. But if you're like at C1 looking at C2, I think it's not a bad pickup. Same thing with C3 looking at C4. I think that's also a good pickup. Jean is one of the OG characters who's been around the game for a while now, and I still think she holds her own to this day. So I highly recommend picking up a Jean if you haven't already. And also I should state very clearly, if you're debating on which 5-star to pick, I always just recommend going for the ones you don't have. Generally, constellations are just not as fun as new characters would be. That's just my opinion. I guess if you're really obsessed with a character like Jean or Qiqi, hey, go all out, get C6. But overall, for enjoyment purposes, I always just suggest going for new characters as it expands your roster and gives you more opportunities to play with the new characters and get to try them out. And that's going to lead me into our next character, who is Miss Mona Majestus, who is personally one of my favorite characters in the game. She's the only 5-star I have at C6, and I tend to use her as a main DPS, which is not how she's meant to be used at all. She has a really good burst, which can do some insane damage. You can get like 5 million damage ticks, but generally she's not that bad of a character. I do think she tends to fall off when you compare her to some of the other Hydro supports such as Xingqiao and Yelan. However, I still think she's one of those characters who holds her own today. When you throw her on a set like, for example, the 4 Police Noblesse, she works fine with that. You get her on some recharge. She actually has a talent that actually converts some of her recharge into Hydro damage bonus, so it's very beneficial to build energy recharge on her. Her constellations, if you do want to go for them, I don't think they're all that valuable. In fact, a lot of them actually pertain to main DPS Mona, like for example the C2 and the C6 are really only good for main DPS Mona. The C4 does give a universal crit rate buff, which is pretty good, and then the C1 is good for elemental reactions, but generally the constellations are not all that game changing. However, again, I still think Mona is one of those characters who still holds her own, probably in like an A tier, S tier kind of character, and can still be with the best of them. As you can see, we one-shot all 3 mobs there with just her burst alone. Although those were like weak NPC type mobs, hey, it's still fun. Her little E ability can taunt the enemy for a little while as they attack aimlessly at her little thing. If you enjoy drifting around on the water easily, you can use her illusionary torrent state. Although, you know, the shark is coming out, which kind of outclasses it. But that being said, I think she's a very fun character and should definitely be on the higher priority out of all the characters if you want to pick her up. Now, I remember saying earlier in this video that Qiqi was the worst option, but there may be somebody that outclasses her. The debatably worst 5-star in the game, Dehya. Or I don't even know if it's debatable anymore. I think she is just probably the worst 5-star in the game. Her kit is very contradictory is the way I would describe it. Her burst is a huge attack that does a decent amount of damage, but the problem is its energy regeneration is very slow and it takes forever to get up. Not to mention it's a burst ability, so it doesn't work with things like Yelan or Xingqiao, which makes me like really depressed. In fact, there are not many great team options for Dehya in general. She can somewhat function as a sub DPS if you want to use her skill, although she just is not as good as other pyro supports are. Like, we legit have Bennett in the game. And not to mention Zhongling, who just does what she does, but like a bajillion times better. I would debate that the Guoba attack is more powerful than the Molten Inferno E attack, my opinion. So if you're trying to use her or function her as a sub DPS, I mean, you can do it. It's just super niche. The other alternative is, of course, burst DPS. The team that I've found that works best for Dehya burst DPS is Dehya, not Mona. Usually I have Zhong Ling in this slot, and then Kazuha Bennett, and this has been the best mono pyro team that I found to work with Dehya. And even then, it only works because she has 3 of the best supports in the game beside her. But anyways, I don't feel like dogging on this character too hard because she genuinely is one of my favorite characters in the game. And even though they completely ruin the script with this character because she's the most badass character in all of Sumeru and yet one of the weakest characters in game, I still want to love her even though she's terrible. As for her constellations, I mean, you can get them, I guess. I don't think they're all that worth it. A lot of them function around her burst ability and making her a burst DPS, which is functionable. So if you are using burst DPS Dehya, I guess you can pick these up. But other than that, let's move on to our next character, Keqing, who has actually got a lot better over time. Keqing was a character who was starting to get slowly outclassed by every DPS in the game near the end of Inazuma. However, when Dendro came out, she got a lot better. With the addition of Dendro, she's become a really functional DPS in a lot of different teams. Qiqin is like one of the best reactions in the game, in my opinion. It does crap tons of damage, kills the enemy, which is all you really need to do, and you can of course float around. You want to be doing charge attacks mainly with Keqing, but you can also throw some normals in there too. She can function both as a physical DPS and an electro DPS, although you definitely want to be making her mostly an electro DPS if you are playing her with Dendro, because let's be honest, who plays physical anymore? That being said, she can function as physical. If you throw her on something like an Aquila Favonia, it can work. It's just not the most optimal way to play her. The best way to play Keqing is with pairing her with other Dendro units and potentially some Hydro units as well to get the full bloom effect in there. For example, Nahida, really good option. Kokomi for heals. Dendro Traveler works really well. You can even go all Hatham for like double DPS. Raiden, there are tons of good options to pair with Keqing, and she has become a really universally good DPS and one that I think is worth considering for your 5-star. And the last one which I want to discuss is Tighnari. He's the last of the 7, and I think the most recent addition, besides Dehya, to the standard banner, and one who I think has proved to be a pretty fruitful addition. He is a Dendro main DPS who wields a bow, and honestly is a pretty fun character. You use his E, and then you get the auto load up, and you can go immediately. He's also super easy to build because you can throw him on a slingshot, which is a 3-star weapon that you can easily get R5, and he actually works really well with this weapon because of how fast you're going to be getting off your little E and then you're immediate into the charge attacks. I have a lot of fun with this character. He works really well again in Bloom comms or Quicken comms, stuff like that. I generally like to use him on an EM build when I'm playing him with other Electro characters. As for his talents, you really don't need to level up his E at all. There's like no reason to level up his E. You honestly just throw this down so that you can go into the normal attack and then start getting stuff off. And then of course you throw your Electro units in there. You start the aggravate, you start the quicken, and that's everything you need to do with Tighnari. Again, he is another DPS though that is on the standard banner, which does make it so that he's outclassed by a lot of other characters. It just kind of is that way with the standard banner characters. A lot of them are easily outclassed. I do think he is just a little bit worse than Alhaitham is as a Dendro DPS. But other than Alhaitham, there aren't too many other Dendro DPSs as of this moment, other than maybe Emily. Although I'm going to be honest, I've not looked once at this character, so I'm not going to speak on anything pertaining to her. But generally, I think he's a really fun unit and another high class one that I think you should debate choosing. My general rankings for like who you should choose would definitely be like 1 is a group of Keqing, Jean, Tighnari, Mona, and then just below them would be Diluc, and then just below Diluc would be Qiqi, and then just below Qiqi would be Dehya. Would probably be my order. As for which one I'm choosing, I'm choosing Dehya because I realized that truly nothing in this game matters because I can beat the game with any character I want imaginable. So I just want to make the worst characters better to make the game harder for myself. But that's just me. Let me know who you're choosing down in the comments below. Anyways, I hope this video helped you out a little bit. And if you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing or leaving a like down below. And anyways, that's going to be all for me. And I'm going to see you all in the next one. Peace.